Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to talk to this man. And the reason it is for me is because the first time I met him, I was been there a couple of times before we started thinking about the beer spot, Lawrence and I, but we did a lot of planning at Hallertau there in Riverhead. And this is, of course, is the great Steve Plowman, who was lurking about in those days, doing what he does so well. So Steve Plowman, it's just great to talk to you.
Yeah, kia ora, Jason. Thanks for having on your Zoom channel, the Beer Spot. Very excited to be here. And yes, you did spend many hours planning, and I feel like I contributed to that process in quite a significant way.
Yes, indeed. Certainly, at least with beer.
Yeah, and a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah, and croquettes and jalapeno poppers.
Yes. Oh, I'm getting hungry again.
So, Steve Plowman, we're talking to you today because you are, well, basically you're Hallertau. We can see your likeness in the background there. You're obviously the guy on the chariot. Yeah, looks very familiar. So, Steve Plowman of Hallertau, you're our Morningside Brew Buddy this month, which we're very grateful for. Thank you so much, mate. And that,
hey.
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to have you there in the city, although I hope we're not taking any business away from Karangahape.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. No, totally different vibe. The tap house is pumping along. Morningside is, has really got a nice following now. It's definitely my favourite beer destination before and after the rugby/cricket at Eden Park. Works incredibly well as a launching off pad for any sort of Eden Park event.
Lovely, thank you for that. While we're tugging each other, Steve, you have gone now from the Bastion in Riverhead, the Hallertau and Beer Garden, to now 3 venues. So would you please tell everyone who's watching where the other 2 venues are?
So yeah, the Hallertau mothership is out in Riverhead for 15 years. And then last year we managed to open a new venue, the opposite corner of Auckland, southeast Auckland, down in Clevedon. We took over the old pub down there and plenty of space in the garden, so it was an ideal venue to create the same sort of, warm Gemütlichkeit, that the sense of warmth and belonging you get from that, classic German beer garden thing. It was a perfect environment that we could spread out Gemütlichkeit all over that area and rub it in. So when you're down there, you just absorb all that, the warmth and the feeling of, being part of something special. So that's going pretty well. And then after the COVID thing, we reimagined our shithole of a cocktail bar, Love Bucket, into quite a pleasant Hallertau tap house on K Road. And we managed to splash a few buckets of Gemütlichkeit around the walls in there too. So that sense of warmth and belonging, really, it is there. So, you can get a nice pint of fresh Hallertau beer, order some electric barbecue chicken from next door, and just settle in for the night.
Lovely, lovely. And you called Love Bucket a shithole. I didn't think it was. I enjoyed the moments I had at Love Bucket, and yet to attend the new tap house with all of its, what's that phrase you're using? With all
Gemütlichkeit.
Yes, Gemütlichkeit. So I look forward to going there. So, but this expansion has been quite quick for you. I guess it was kind of easier on Karangahape because Love Bucket was already there, so it was more of a conversion. But quite a big leap to sort of go to Clevedon, which desperately needed something probably a little more boutique and Gemütlichkeit-ish.
Yeah. Well, Clevedon, we've been looking for a new site for a while, but because we had quite, a rigorous set of exactly what we wanted, had to be quite specific, needed that big beer garden, needed to be sort of a bit rural. So it took us a while to find something which ticked all those boxes. And yeah, the local support has been very heartwarming. And hopefully this week we're going to order our little 600-litre brew house that we're going to drop in down there. So that's going to be the experimental hub of the Hallertau brewing scene. So send all the boys from the big brew out here down there to do wacky shit. We can do some collabs. Could do like the Beer Spot 10th year birthday beer down there, or the 6th birthday. You know, lots of crazy collabs in that brewery because it's only 10 kegs, so it doesn't matter how crazy it is. It's all going to get smashed around.
Well, you know, Steve,
the Beer Spot.
I don't want to say.
Beer Spot having their 5 venues, you know, 200 taps around town. It's just a fantastic time to be brewing crazy experimental craft beers because there's just such good demand now.
Look, I think it's always hard to talk to you, Steve. You're always so off tangent. But it's been really funny for us, you know, doing this. Going from 1 venue to 5 venues in 18 months was just stupid. So first of all, I wouldn't recommend anyone even do that. But to like, you
and Lawrence are some of the most stupid people I've ever met. Yes.
Man, look, it's so nice to have that reinforced. But so to get to Clevedon though, and I'm just going to push the barrel out here a little bit. There would have probably been quite a few more traditional mainstream drinkers down that way. How have they received the Hallertau love?
Well, it's been a process, especially the landlord Doug, who's an old school farmer. The first meeting he said, "Oh look, I know you make some of your own shit, but me and the locals would just like to keep a couple of beers on tap. We need Steinlager Pure, Waikato, Spates Mid, and Spates, if that's okay." And I was like, "Doug, I'll see what I can do. Can't promise anything." And then a few weeks from opening, he was like, "So what about this tap lineup?" It's like, "Doug, maybe a big bottle of Line Red in the fridge. This is probably the best I can do." Then on a day, he comes up to me, Doug says, "Right, just so we're totally straight, there is no normal beer at this pub anymore." And I'm like, "That's right, Doug, it's just the shit that I make." But since then, Doug has become a huge fan of the number 8, the Rice Lager. The beauty about Hallertau beers is, you know, we do have such an approachable range of beers that we like to think appeal to all the beer drinkers.
Look, I can only reinforce that, Steve, because it's true. And unfortunately, my weakness is the good old stuntman, and I always find it very difficult not to rock on into one of the beautiful Hallertau locations and just go straight for the stunty, because for a big beer, it's 8.5%, I think.
Yes.
For a big beer, it's so beautifully balanced. You just get there's just such a delicious malt sweetness to it. It's not at all fusel, you know, that alcohol is hidden so beautifully amongst the hops and the malt. 1, 2, 3 floor.
Well, that's actually a very good point. We had a few issues with that beer down on the news site in Clevedon, to the point we actually had to take it off tap because some of the blue collar locals were coming in and drinking 5 pints and then wondering why they were lying on the floor without holding on. And yeah, it's like, guys, you can't really do that. You know, it's not that sensible, but it was continuing to happen. So we were just like, well, let's just, for a while, we'll take it off tap, get them, you know, drinking some normal beers, get their craft beer chops up a little bit, give a little more respect for the IPAs and double IPAs, and then we'll, you know, reintroduce it back in there.
And so generally it sounds like it's been pretty well accepted, Steve, because, you know, it's always that most difficult part of transitioning someone, a mainstream drinker, to great beer, is getting them to take that first sip and removing all of those barriers. When we were doing our due diligence for the Beer Spot, we found there were 3 main barriers to folks trying this sort of beer. The first one was price. The second one was beer styles. And the third one was something I can't remember. It doesn't really matter.
Staff training.
Yeah, and the thing is, once you sort of, if you mention, definitely to hardcore mainstream drinkers, if you mention the word the C word, which we don't use here, we call it great, you see the walls go up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so it's always been quite difficult to get those people to be brave enough to transition. How have you done it in places like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jason. It's a really intelligent question from you. So staff training is the key. I mean, we've done a lot of training with the guys down there about the importance of creating that somebody's first craft beer experience, because somebody that drinks the same shit all day, all of a sudden they walk into a place, there's nothing they know, and it is actually terrifying, isn't it? We've trained the staff to identify those people, and your staff would have seen it too. You see the person, they walk in, their eyes are all over the place, they're like short, shallow breaths, like a very thin sheen of sweat on the head, because they don't know what the fuck's going on here. They've never tried any of these beers before in their lives. So it's all about the staff identifying that moment of sheer panic, that craft beer horror, and just going, hey, it's okay. What do you normally drink? What sort of beer do you normally drink? Do you drink a Heineken? Like a Heineken? Dude, just have a sample of this and just engage with them really quickly, because that terror can turn into, the fight or flight. So they either just run away or they just start getting really aggressive about the fact that there is no Steinlager or there is no Lion Red. So it's just grabbing a hold of that and giving them that big beery hug, and just, beer is beer. It's all good beer. We'll find you something you like, man. Don't stress. We're going to make sure you have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And it's important for them to know that there's no dungers, right? And
yeah.
I think this is the fight, the good fight that we're trying to push out there, Steve, isn't it? And it's all about breaking. I liken it to Stockholm syndrome. I think the big breweries have had the run of the mill for 60 years, telling people who they are, and if you're that type of person, what you should drink, and sort of where to get it. And I think folks now finally are starting to realize that, holy cow, we've been really held under, if you like, in terms of our attitude to choice and approach and where we can find it. But I feel like definitely in the last 12 months that's finally starting to change. It feels like the pendulum's swinging a little bit more towards this type of beer.
It is. And the other question people are starting to ask, which I find, very fulfilling, is people are asking, well, I'm buying this beer, I'm paying my money for it. Where is this money going? And that's where wonderful humans like you and Lawrence have just done such a wonderful job embracing the local independent beer scene. So that every dollar you spend at the beer spot on the beer goes to a local business and supports the local brands and the local community, which I think is a truly wonderful thing, Jason.
Hey, thanks, Steve. It was always our mission to have 5 branches in 5 years. We managed to do that in 4.5, which we're chuffed about. We're broke, but we did it. And there's 200 truly free taps in the marketplace in Auckland, which we're really chuffed about. And it's the only way we can do it, right? Is by building taps. It didn't matter how we sliced the onion. We just needed more taps in the marketplace. So we're very thankful to have been able to tick that off with the opening of Whangapraoa last month, and which means the 200 taps are there. But what a lot of folks who are watching probably don't understand is that in terms of the beer drinking market, 93% of the beer drinking market drink mainstream beers from companies that are owned by foreign interests, Japanese, Dutch, other countries that are not New Zealand. But there's around over 200 independent breweries in the other 7% of the market. So it's struggling for that market share. And a lot of people, I'd like to hear what you think about this, Steve. A lot of brewers I talk to believe that's a concrete ceiling, that 7% is all that our type of beer will ever get in the marketplace. I don't believe that. And I think that, that's part of our job as the beer spot, is to introduce more mainstream palates to this type of beer. Do you think that 7% is a set mark for our industry, Steve?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's absolute bullshit. And I think there is a huge amount of beer being drunk in New Zealand by people that if they actually did the opportunity to try local independent beer made by local companies, they would happily drink it. You look, for example, cities like Portland in Oregon, where like over half the beer drunk in that city is independent local brewers. So that's a long way away from 7%. So I think potentially through education and exposure, which is exactly what the beer spot promotes, local brands, if people get to drink it and then they understand the process and hey, well actually I'm not going to spend money on beer which I know is going to go offshore. I'm going to spend it on fresh local beer brewed by people that I can often meet at the beer spot. Like most days you go down to the beer spot, there's at least a brewer or two hanging around. So you actually get to have a relationship with the people that are making your beer, which makes the whole process much more special.
And for you, Steve, because I think that's quite a big deal for the brewers to sort of get out amongst the consumers. And obviously you can do that at Hallertau at your venues. And it's great to see you when you pop in to Huapai and the other branches, mate. So I really appreciate that. But that's a super important part, isn't it? To sort of get to know your customers and connect that way. There are a lot of brewers who spend time in the brew house. It's very difficult for them to get out, but that's an important part of it, right?
Oh, it's a very important part. And to be honest, I go to a beer spot at least once a week because as a brewer, not only meeting the people that drink the beer, but it's just a great opportunity to go and see what other local breweries are doing and try their beer. And I think it's an educational tool for the brewers as well. And at Hallertau, we really like to reach out not only to our drinkers but to home brewers as well. And a lot of keen home brewers go to the beer spot too. So we're very open with what we do here. I get contacted by home brewers all the time wanting information and ideas, and I'm happy to share my recipes with anyone that wants them. One of our locals was trying to brew Maximus and he's trying to ask me about the hops, and I was like, dude, here's a recipe, just go for it. So sharing knowledge and information, from the home brewer through the beer drinker up to the brewers, I think is a really important part of what happens down at the beer spot.
I really admire the brewers who are brave enough to share their recipes, because I think that does a couple of things. First of all, it sort of takes away that sort of mystique and secrecy about what goes into the beer. But second of all, if a home brewer is going to give it a go and try and make that recipe, what's the next thing they're going to do? They're going to go out and buy another set of those beers to compare, see if it matches up a bit. So I think that's a great idea.
And often they bring the beer in for me to try too, which is good because I love free beer.
Now, the other thing that you do, I'm not sure if you still do this, Steve, so I'm sorry if I'm bringing up something that you don't do anymore, but you used to run courses, brew courses for home brewers in the brewery there. Are you still doing that?
Oh, we have in the past, but we haven't done that since last year. But it is something we're looking to do more of. And also we're looking to do more of the beer faults training courses.
Nice.
It's a new thing we're embarking on. We did a couple of those last year and we got really good feedback because a lot of people learning about beer don't actually understand what some of the potential issues are. And so learning to identify potential problems with beer, you can not only improve your home brew, but in a retail environment, you can understand why you like a beer, why you don't potentially like this other beer so much. And, if there's any issues with the beer, you actually understand what's going on with them.
I think fault training is a great thing. And, some of our crew are going to do another session with you in a couple of weeks. It's always really helpful. Yes. But I was thinking about that. And over the past sort of 4.5 years that we've been open, we've had, the majority of beers have been excellent, but definitely in the earlier days, you'd get some things that are a little bit patchy or a little bit inconsistent. And the choice is to either send it back or just try and push through what you've got left. And so I was kind of in two minds about fault training because sometimes, especially the butterscotch fault, a lot of people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Some of the faults, the diacetyl one, some people actually prefer it because it makes the beer a little bit sweeter and a little bit fuller. So yeah, at the end of the day, there's certain brews in the US that have actually always produce beers with a little bit of that character, and it's a character. So that's the thing about beer. At the end of the day, if you like something and you want to drink it, then no one can tell you that you're wrong, because it's your palate. So it's your responsibility to enjoy what you drink.
I'm so happy about that, because I know absolutely nothing about beer. So it's good to get away with it. Hey, Steve, I want to talk a little bit about your deep, dark past. And so you did a Bachelor of Science, I think, and I think it was at Otago, and you you majored in geology.
Yes.
So what did you do with that? It must have been either you're a diamond. It must have been mining of some nature or something.
Well, I started off. Well, I was at Otago doing my geology degree, and that's where I started homebrewing as well. My first homebrew batch was 1991 on 149 Frederick Street in North Dunedin. I brewed a stout, and it was pretty shit, and we drank it all in one night. So obviously it wasn't that shit. But then, yeah, I finished my degree and took over overseas, and I worked in Asia for a while, doing oil exploration, but I hated that. So I went to London and did some stuff there for a few years, mainly on computer mapping, but I hated that. Then ended up in Australia, West Australia, and that was a terrible place. But that's where I actually did my postgraduate qualification in brewing. There was a university over there with a brewery set up. So I actually did a postgraduate brewing course over there, and then managed to score a job setting up a new brewery in Margaret River.
Oh, nice.
And I did that for a year. That's the Colonial Brewery, which I think is about to change its name. Original brewer down there. And then this place in Riverhead came up 15 years ago last month. And
wow.
Yeah, we've been here ever since.
Mate, it was so what was the impetus for you and Haley to jump on that site? Because if I remember rightly, there wasn't too much going on in that site. It was pretty run down. And what was it, a winery in the beginning?
Yeah, so this site was it's had a long history. So it's been a winery here since 1927. The
Wow.
Yelch family started it up. And about 30 years ago, they changed. 35 years ago, they changed it to a fruit winery, which was still running when we bought it. But there was also a brewery running here. So this was the original, the second site of Pilot Bay Brewing Company.
Right.
It started off in Tauranga, got shifted up here about 25 years ago. So it was going cheap because it was failing, but it had everything on site. It had a restaurant, it had a kitchen, it had a brewery, had a winery, which we didn't really want. But it was pretty good, pretty well priced, and it was all existing. So all we had to do was come in and do some major renovations, change the beer brand, and then make the food decent. And then sort of just little steps from there over the last 15 years. We've done expansions and put new breweries in, and it's been a slow, painful process, but we've got a very friendly bank manager. So it's all been little steps at a time.
Geez, I wish we had one of those, mate. Hey, was it scary? Was it tough?
Well, most of the time you're sort of just grinding away, just trying to make progress. But the big step was when we put in the beer garden, because that was a particularly significant investment, and going from not carrying too much debt to carrying quite a lot of debt. So that part was quite scary. But we had pretty good belief in the brands that we'd built up, and we've always enjoyed really, really strong local support from our locals. So we're pretty confident, and thankfully our locals have really stood up and supported us, over the last sort of 6 years with Beer Garden, and through the whole shutdown process. Everyone started ordering the beer online, so we're really lucky to have such really strong local support from the Northwest Auckland and the greater Auckland area.
It's so beautiful, Steve. I'm hearing that more and more from the brewers that I do these interviews with, as they're just so grateful for the local support. But also you've got to be really proud of that legacy that you've built over that time, because people vote with their feet, man, and unless you've done it right, they won't come back. And you'll know that. So you've got to take a little bit of, a little pat on the back there for doing what you've done so well for so long, mate.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate that. It's a fine line though, because out here we've always tried to do some things a little bit differently. You know, we've had wine on tap for the last 10 years, and we're trying to, you know, reduce all our bottle intake, so we don't wine bottles, we use all syrups and stuff. So we do stuff a little bit differently, and it's a matter of trying to create a vibe but not trying to alienate anyone. We do get people whinging all the time that we don't have Coca-Cola and we don't have bourbon, you know, but we do what we do, and we try and make sure that people enjoy it. And, you know, over the years you do get haters, people complaining, but you've got to stick to what you believe that you want to do and sort of trust in the formula. And that's what we've always done. It was pretty hard, you know, the first, 15 years ago, the first couple of years of operation, people walking in, you're going, you can't run a bar without Heineken, you know. But I've always said our beer is, you know, the best beer at Auckland, so why would I put on somebody else's shitty beer? You know, I'm not going to put mainstream beer on. So I had a few sleepless nights, you know, the first couple of years when, you know, it wasn't going very well, but gradually, you know, we sort of built up that local support and sort of started succeeding.
You know, when we were scheming and plotting at Hallertau for the beer spot, you know, we started doing that in 2014. We, you know, started sort of having our little get-togethers and meetings at Hallertau to plot the way forward. And one of the things we considered as well was having a couple of mainstream taps on, you know. And we realized after we went to a couple of places that did that the Stockholm syndrome is so prevalent, this sympathy for your captor, and the brands are so recognizable that people will just walk into a place and you might have, you know, a bunch of independent taps and 2 or 3 mainstream taps, but because people are so conditioned, they'll just immediately go for, I know that beer, I'm going to have that. And so we realized pretty early on that no mainstream beers, can't do it.
You can't do it, eh? You've got to, you know, stick to your guns and support the brands that you really want to support. And, you know, multinational beer companies are just not anyone I ever want to, you know, get behind.
And it's been so unfortunate, you know, how those companies have been, you know, whittled away and sold off to the foreign interests. And, you know, we have this a suburb in Auckland called Hobsonville. It's a reasonably new suburb, and one of our large commercial breweries here, which is perceived to be a New Zealand brewery, built an Australian brewery there.
Yeah.
We had this perceived New Zealand company, which is actually owned by the Japanese, building an Australian brewery in New Zealand to sell an Australian brand to local people in Hobsonville. It's just like, oh my God.
And like all the beer is brewed in Australia. They only brew like 1 or 2 beers on site, and the rest are imported from Australia. It's quite odd.
It's just heartbreaking. But, you know, we've got to keep up the good fight, Steve.
Totally.
So getting back to a little bit about the past. So I think it was the wine business Pukeko Grove? It was fruit wines mainly?
Yeah, it was fruit wine. It was Feijoa, kiwi fruit, and boysenberry mainly. But when we bought it, it was called Riverhead Estate. It was a very classy fruit wine brand, but no one bought it. So we spent quite a lot of money rebranding it to the Pukeko Grove. We spent quite a lot of time and a lot of money on that, and the sales didn't change at all. So yeah, about 6 years ago, we decided that the fruit wine business was not an area that we had any expertise or desire to excel in. So we sold off the whole thing and then made room for the new brew house we put in 6 years ago.
Excellent, mate. Look, the story is such a good one, Steve. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about something else you do differently. And you mentioned it in more words than this, but you're actually you think quite sustainably, but you don't sort of hang your hat on sustainability. You just sort of try and take actions as a matter of course, rather than sort of branding yourself on it, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah, that's just the way we like to do business. And I see the sustainability thing, for me, it comes out of local relationships is the way it works for us. And I've local relationships with all the local wineries. We try and get as much tap wine as we can. I won't sell wine from a winemaker I've never met or visited his winery. So we only have a really local offering in terms of the wine and local market garden, barefoot garden. He was dad of one of the kids in my son's cricket team, so I got to know him, and he sells us direct from his market garden. I had a meeting yesterday with Tim Dangen, who's got Dangen Farm out of Muruwa, and he takes all our spent grain. And we're now in a position where we can actually buy cows directly off the farmer and slaughter them on site, and then get them processed up the road in Kumu, and then sell them through our bar restaurant. So for me, it's all about connecting with your local community and finding what they do and how they do it and why they do it, and using that as part of your brand story. And it turns out that's the most sustainable way to manage your business. But it's all part of a relationship process, which I've been engaging in over the last 15 years.
And it's it really is a return to the way things were, sort of during the 70s and 80s, where you had no choice but to go local. So it's nice to see sort of the clock turning back to that, especially, you know, that's got to be one of the benefits. Also, I know you've been working on it for 15 years, but there's got to be one of the benefits that's coming out of this COVID thing is to reconnect locally.
Totally, yeah. People, you know, you're stuck in your suburb more, people actually spend more time finding out what's happening in the suburb, like who makes stuff. Over COVID, I discovered that there's a shoe manufacturer in Dunedin. So I bought some new boots from McKinley's, and they're the best boots I've ever had, and they're made in Dunedin. You know, you're not importing, you know, European or Chinese shoes. And when the sole wears out, you send them back to them, and for $80 they'll put a new sole on them, so you can get years out of them. And it's actually sort of, it's a way of thinking about what do we do here, you know, locally. What's something we can connect with? What's a product that we can support other local businesses? So we've really had a big focus on that, and I think a lot of people have, which is really nice.
Look, and another thing you do quite differently as well, Steve, is that you're not really down with awards or sort of brewing gongs and things like that. What's your attitude behind that?
Well, I've always been never really been into entering awards, and I've done a lot of judging over the years, and I really enjoy judging. I really like to focus on the judging process. And if I've got beers in the awards, it really, I think it affects the way that you view the beers. But also, I mean, I've always brewed beers for drinking, not judging. If you want to win awards, you've got to start way back and design beers to fit specific holes and to fit specific categories. And it's never been an ambition of mine to win awards. I mean, our mantra is our best customers at Hallertau are the people sitting in the beer garden at the moment. And I'm like, well, if this beer's got 10 gold medals, is it going to improve their experience here? No, it's not. So I don't see putting time and effort and focus into winning awards. I think it would detract from the overall experience that customers have here, because you're putting your attention into trying to get fresh beer to a competition rather than making fresh beer for people to drink. So it's never been, I've never not entered awards. I'm just never at the point where I think my beer is guaranteed to win all gold medals. If I ever got there, maybe I'd enter, maybe not. But, you know, and the potential for me to enter an award, there is a chance it might not win. So it's probably not even worth it.
Fair enough. So, Steve, are there any more? Are you going to open any more Hallertaus around the place? Is there an opportunity for more expansion, or what's the plan from here?
We've been discussing that, and we're keeping an eye on it at the moment. We're not driven to open new places like you in Hallertau, because we're not crazy like you guys. But probably the next plan is we've got a brewery up in Rarotonga, which is just makes lager. It's the Rarotonga brewery. But that's actually where it is now. It's run out of room. So we're actually looking for a new site for that. So the next project could be to introduce a Hallertau style beer garden up in Rarotonga and brew all the beer locally up there, but maybe expand the range to produce, you know, a couple of pale ales and stuff. So it won't actually be a Hallertau, but it'll be a Hallertau-esque version located in Rarotonga. So that's probably the project which we're looking at the rest of this year and early next year.
So of course I'll be getting an invite to the opening of that one, Steve.
Absolutely.
Hey, look, buddy, thanks so much for your time. It's been great to talk to you, and it's always a pleasure going up to Hallertau on the Riverhead there to see you and Haley. But you're always working so goddamn hard. It's usually a fleeting g'day. Try this, and then you're off again. But it'd be nice to sit down for. We're going to see you in a couple of weeks for a bit of fault training, I think, which the team are really looking forward to. So
yeah, and I'll be hanging around the beer spot Morningside over the next couple of weeks as well. Just
nice,
supporting the Brew Buddy brand.
That's the spirit. I love it. So thanks a lot, Steve. Just before we go, please tell the folks where the Hallertau venues are again.
So the original ranch is out at Riverhead, 1171 Coatesville Riverhead Highway, and then in the city, 309 K Road is the tap house, and then if you're heading down to Clevedon, it's the old Clevedon pub, just past town on the way out to Kawakawa Bay.
Beautiful. Hey, Steve, thank you very much, and thank you again for your support of the beer spot and being our brew buddy at Morningside this month. I really appreciate it, mate. Go well, buddy.
Thanks, man. My pleasure, and thanks for providing such a fantastic offering for the independent local brewers in New Zealand. Keep up the good work, guys.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you, buddy. See you, mate.